he just very abruptly asked if I would consider organ donation. And I remember just being kind of frozen and then thinking to myself, if there is a chance that I could keep another person or family from feeling what I am feeling right now, I want to do that. And I had told Maya in a conversation many months before that I was putting the pink sticker on my license. And she said, "Oh, that's a good idea. Good for you, Mom." She never said what her wishes would be, but because she didn't object when I said I was going to be a donor myself, and because I was the only one who could make the decision, that's the decision I made. So I said yes.
Welcome to the Persistence U podcast with Lisbeth. That's you as in university, but we're really much more of a community here. Lisbeth Meredith is an author, speaker, and online teacher. Each week, she'll be delivering amazing stories from survivors and strivers, all threaded together with a dose of persistence. We're so glad you're listening.
Hello, I am trying something new and recording directly to Descript for this early part. Friends, before we get started with the amazing Eleanor Vincent, I just wanted to let you know about a writing opportunity you might be interested in. Word and Deed Publishing, that is Word and Deed Publishing, has a call for entries out for their upcoming anthology, Goodbye for Now. And for anyone who's lost someone that they think about, maybe didn't get a chance to eulogize, and want to celebrate what that person meant to them, this is your beautiful opportunity. They do not pay for this, but they give you a couple of copies of the hardback or the paperback of the publication of Goodbye for Now. I can show you what the book cover is already, and it's already got some pretty impressive stories inside it. So if you want to be included in that and work with a small group of really supportive editors, if you've dreamed of being published and or really honoring the person and commemorating them in a way that will never go away, this is your opportunity. Submissions are due by July 15th, 2024. I realize that some of you will be hearing this years from now, possibly. So just keep in mind, this unique opportunity is going to end about July 15th, 2024. Let me read you a little bit about it. So the submissions are only 800 to 900 words. You get to include a photo of you with your loved one. You don't have to be a strong writer at the moment, but just have a story that is in your heart that you want to share. And if you want to connect with Word and Deed directly, just to ask some questions or maybe even enjoy a Zoom call with the staff, email them at goodbyefornow2024@gmail.com. This is a great opportunity as someone who really benefited from being in an anthology before I wrote my memoir. It's an excellent opportunity. It's not a lot of work, but you get the opportunity to get feedback from editors and figure out, is writing for you long term, and also to have your words in an actual physical book. That's a gift in itself. So there's the opportunity, and thanks so much. I hope you'll take me up on it.
Hi, sisters and brothers. It's Elizabeth, and I am so very honored to have Eleanor Vincent with us today. Before, I'm going to say in 2015, when I was struggling to get my memoir published, Pieces of Me, Rescuing My Kidnapped Daughters, I had the daunting task, as all writers face, of finding anyone who wrote a book in a similar genre who would endorse mine. So you hand them your first pages, you hope that they like it, you hope that they have time. And I will be darned, I loved her book so much, Swimming with Maya. And she did endorse pieces of me, and I am so very grateful. Since then, she's written a new memoir, a later in life love story about neurodiverse people getting together, she and her husband. So, what a wonderful thing it is to have that support, and to know her is to love her. So, I hope you enjoy Eleanor Vincent as much as I have. And it reminded me, and I can't believe I hadn't reached out to her sooner. When I began the podcast, I joined a couple of the sites that match you up with guests. And unfortunately, I've met some great people. I mean, I have loved my guests, but that also meant that I was kind of filtering those requests to be on the podcast from people that I didn't think about, the people I wanted definitely to have on as much as I should have. So if you are one of my friends who said, I have a theme of resilience in my life or persistence, I'm all about taming trauma and increasing resilience. And what I'm not about is a smooth talking Tony Robbins type of, let me tell you how to live your life for sure. I got it all together, because none of us do. And so I'm very thankful to take a step back a little bit and to curate more carefully as I move the podcast to that twice a month typically release. Thanks so much for being here as ever. I hope you love Eleanor. She has recently had a big anniversary of her award-winning book, Swimming with Maya, as well as the anniversary of something else that she'll tell us about. So thanks for being here. Can't wait to introduce you to Eleanor. We are. Eleanor Vincent, thank you so very much for being on Persistence U today. I am tickled pink, and I did give an introduction, and we'll correct a little bit of that in a few minutes. But tell us a little bit, if you could, about yourself. And, not only have you written some books, but you have a good long career. So could you tell us just a little bit about that before we get into the heart of the conversation about Swimming with Maya?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I have been writing professionally now for over 50 years, and I began my career as a journalist and
Okay.
learned some good skills. Learned how to sit down at a typewriter back in the day and compose and get a story done in an hour and a half. And those skills have really stood me in good stead as I moved into creative writing later on. Um, I think I wrote my first novel when I was 26, and it stayed in a drawer, which was probably a good thing. And then I went through a real period of being devoted to poetry, all the time working first as a journalist and then working in organizational communications
Okay.
for the bulk of my career. I was a corporate editor for the phone company and then also for a very large HMO. And it was a great career, loved it, but I was always doing creative writing on the side. And at mid-career, when I was in my 40s, I went back to Mills College and got an MFA in creative writing. And it was at that point that my daughter's accident happened. I was in the middle of a novel. I had to set that aside after Maya died and pivot and start doing a work of creative nonfiction. And luckily for me, Mills had just added creative nonfiction to the roster of genres that it was teaching. And so Elma Zabinader was the first professor of creative nonfiction. She's still there. And she kind of helped midwife the very, very early drafts of this book through workshops and feedback and all of that. So it was my master's thesis. And then I knew it was a story I wanted to keep working on. So I turned it into a memoir, but the whole process took 10 years. So it was published when I was 55, and I'm 75 now, so 20 years. My book just had its 20th birthday.
Oh, that is so exciting. And, that's just huge. And can you tell us a little bit about the book? I mean, the day that Maya was 19 years old, life was just beginning. She was in community college. Can you take us back a little bit to that day that your life changed forever?
Well, it was such an amazing time. She had just auditioned at UCLA and USC in their theater arts programs, which are both top flight programs. We had just received a letter from UCLA saying, not only are you accepted, but we're giving you a full scholarship. And so this was huge for me as a single mom. Huh. And of course for her, because for her ambitions, and she was very ambitious, it meant, well, this was her ticket because that's such a well-respected program. So she was out celebrating the day of her accident. She was celebrating this acceptance that we had just got. She was home on spring break. And I still look back on that in wonder because the amount of cognitive dissonance involved in being so happy and excited, all our dreams are coming true, this amazing thing has happened, and then I'm getting a call from the hospital saying, your daughter is in critical condition, get here right away. And I just couldn't put those two things together. It was shocking, doesn't even cover it.
I can't even imagine. I mean, you're on such a high because finally things are taking off. And it's hard if you've been a single parent. It's really hard. So to know that your dreams are right there, her dreams are going to come true, and then getting that call. Did you know how bad she was injured when they called you?
No, they were saying all the words, but I couldn't take it in. And they didn't, when they called me, they didn't really tell me the full extent of it. I learned that later because they had called my ex-husband, her stepfather, to tell him, and they told him the truth because he lived a 5-hour drive away. And they said, we think it's unlikely she's going to survive. You better get down here. And so he just dropped everything, got in the car and came. They didn't say that to me. They just said, she's in brain surgery now. We're doing everything we can. It's a serious injury. Please come. So, I had an 11-year-old and I had to make arrangements for somebody to stay with her. Luckily, we had some very good friends, and my friend Jean came over and stayed with Megan, and I went to the hospital. But I was immediately in a state of shock. I mean, just nothing made sense. My hands and feet were freezing cold. I felt like I was looking down the wrong end of a telescope. Your vision kind of narrows. It's difficult to recreate. I mean, I do it in the book, but it's difficult for me to recreate it now, 32 years later, because it was such an altered state. And, that's the brain and the psyche's way of protecting the body and the organism from just completely falling apart.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Had she had much experience horseback riding? Because this was a horseback riding
Oh,
incident.
no, she was riding bareback on a dare. Oh, no. When I say she fell from a horse, she wasn't horseback riding. They had hiked out into a very remote area near a state park, and there was a horse that was unsecured, unfenced, just there. And she was with a couple of guys and a young woman whom I later found out that was the first day they met. I did not know that for years. I didn't realize that the other girl had not known Maya before this happened. And the two girls got on the horse together. And they were both bucked off, but Maya's position on the horse, the other girl slid off and Maya was coming after her. And the downdraft of that girl going off made Maya come off faster, and she went directly off the back into a cantilever fall on her head. And a cantilever fall from any height is the most destructive. Like when people get brain aneurysms and they pass out or strokes, often it's the cantilever fall that creates the damage. So also took me a long time to understand that, because we just couldn't understand how this fall could have been so devastating to her brain. But it was just a perfect storm. And the fall was very efficient. And, I couldn't understand any of that. It took me 4 days. She was in a coma for 4 days. And the night they operated on her, right after the accident, the surgeon attempted to tell me, and again, this is in the book. I report the conversation that I had with him. I'll never forget that. In which he said, I've never seen a brain more red and angry. And I would say she has about a 97.5 chance of survival. And what I heard is, oh, good, 2% chance. Well, I started planning her rehabilitation. I mean, that's how crazy I was. Okay. What I heard is there's a chance. I didn't hear, no, no, she's going to die. That's not what I heard. I heard, oh, we're going to have to plan for her rehabilitation. We're going to have to find a facility. She's going to have to learn to walk and talk again. I had it all mapped out,
Right.
which is so tragic. But I needed to believe that because I just couldn't. I really, really couldn't take it in that night. It took me 4 days of standing next to her in a profound coma on life support with tubes and wires everywhere, being, on a ventilator with her breath, in that mechanical rhythm that is a ventilator, which is very spooky. And finally, it just hit me. What I want is not going to happen.
Oh my goodness. Did you have to make that decision alone then?
Well, no, because they made the decision for me, thank God. I don't think I could have unplugged her.
Okay.
They called us into a little windowless conference room. There were social workers and boxes of Kleenex, and at that point, I knew. And the whole family was there. There were probably 15 of us crowded into the room because her boyfriend, to whom she was sort of pre-engaged, he had given her a promise ring, and his family were there. Our family and my ex-husband, who was not her father but her stepfather, had a large family who all lived in the area, so they were there. So there was a whole group of us in that room, and, her surgeon said they had done blood tests and they had this special nuclear study that they could do to see how much blood was perfusing her brain. And he said, there's absolutely no blood flow to her brain. I'm declaring her brain dead. And would you consider organ donation?
Wow. Okay.
Today, they would never ask in that way. But remember, this is 1992. It's still relatively early on in transplantation. And this particular gentleman was a fantastic surgeon, probably one of the best. At least that's what I was told by his superiors. I don't doubt it. But his bedside manner was just not there. Surgeons are technicians. Her other doctors who were the heart doctor who was, taking care of the ventilator and monitoring her heart rate and all that, he was totally different. He was completely sympathetic and told me all kinds of things and gave me hope. But the surgeon, no. And so he just very abruptly asked if I would consider organ donation. And I remember just being kind of frozen and then thinking to myself, if there is a chance that I could keep another person or family from feeling what I am feeling right now, I want to do that. And I had told Maya in a conversation many months before that I was putting the pink sticker on my license. And she said, oh, that's a good idea. Good for you, Mom. She never said what her wishes would be, but because she didn't object when I said I was going to be a donor myself, and because I was the only one who could make the decision, that's the decision I made. So I said yes.
Wow. And that had a pretty profound impact on your later healing, as I remember reading.
Yes, very much so.
Not right away. But, it's a big decision to make. I talked to another person who had lost a very young daughter in her early 20s. And she talked about not, just being so horrified at the question when her daughter died of donation and just was mad that anyone would ever even ask. but you made the decision because you knew you didn't want other families to feel your anguish. And that's pretty
Oh,
huge.
oh, totally. And, I think my whole life has been very much about resilience and healing, first from early childhood abuse, then from relationship trauma. Um, there was just something in me that knew I had to say yes to this. And later, when I learned more about organ donation, I did go through a period of remorse because I learned what they actually did to her body. And that was shocking. Um, but at the same time, I was getting information about the people who had received the organs and the amazing healing that was happening. The heart recipient had two young children. They were 12 and 8 at the time of the transplant, and he was in his mid 50s. So over the years, I've seen it unfold that he lived long enough. He lived for another 16 years after the transplant, long enough to see his daughter go to college, who was 8 at the time he was transplanted. And the liver recipient, whose daughter was only 7 at the time, they didn't even tell her how gravely ill her mother was because she couldn't. It would have been too traumatic. So when Patty got the transplant, Erin was only 7. And then over the years, as time went on, of course, they shared more with her, and she became a huge advocate for transplantation. Now she has 2 beautiful little boys, and my dear friend Patty, who has my daughter's liver, has 2 beautiful grandchildren. So, I've watched as this has unfolded over 32 years, and it's absolutely miraculous. The daughter of the heart recipient reached out to me back in 2012 and said, "Hey, I'm going to be out in California. My husband is interviewing for a job out there. I'd love to see you. Can we get together?" And I said, "Well, of course." So she came and we were talking, and she said, "I wanted to tell you in person that I'm pregnant. The baby is a girl, and we're going to name her Maya."
Oh, that's so beautiful, Eleanor. That is so beautiful. And that's not the only Maya in your life, is it? There's your daughter, but then you have a granddaughter, am I right? That has some.
That's not her first name. Her name is Lucia Maya, her middle
I
name.
love that. So beautiful.
Yeah.
So it seems like you've been pretty involved then with transplantation education, in addition to writing your book.
Well, yes. In the early years, I would give inspirational talks at donor family events because I knew what it feels like. You know, the recipient side of the equation is what typically got back in that time, what typically got written up in the paper or in feature articles. Oh, these recipients, look how amazing. Now they're going on with their lives. And the people who did the donating for privacy and other reasons were not part of the equation. And I felt really strongly about that. Hey, look, if you're going to celebrate the miracle, you better also recognize and acknowledge the tragedy on the other side of it and what those families go through. So I wanted to try to help uplift other donor families because I knew how difficult it was. But I also knew that for my surviving daughter, Megan, it had a huge positive impact because at the age of 11, which is such a critical turning point in a child's life, she saw something so good come out of such a tragedy. So I just felt it was really important to get the word out in a balanced way that includes recipients and donors.
Right. I think that's absolutely beautiful. I think that is so gorgeous. And then to write about it later, did it feel like a way to keep Maya's memory alive? Was it a healing process, publishing your memoir?
I wouldn't say publishing was, no. Writing in the early drafts absolutely was a way of keeping myself alive. Literally, I was suicidal. I mean, every bereaved parent I've ever talked to, especially bereaved mothers, are always, that's never far. I didn't want to harm myself, but I wanted to be where my daughter was. I didn't want to stay here. And so writing about it was a way of keeping her close, doing something that I love to do, and telling a story that I felt from the very moment it happened, I had been handed my writing assignment and I needed to tell this story. I think after the first couple of years, it was no longer what I would consider to be therapeutic. I did my therapy with a therapist, not through writing. Writing is a craft, and I was practicing my craft. And at that point, I'd been doing it as a paid profession for almost 25 years. And I was in a creative writing program and getting a master's degree. So the way I approached it was, how can I tell the best possible story in a way that's going to allow the reader to have access to something that's very difficult? So that's why it took 10 years, because I was really dedicated to trying to make a story that a reader could enter into.
I love it. Good. And you did such a beautiful job. I remember reading it and even the cover, the picture of Maya on it is just so incredibly precious. So I think it's just such an exquisite work. And I had mentioned when I was introducing you before you came on, which needs a little correction, but you have an upcoming memoir. I was thinking of it getting published sooner, but it's a forthcoming second memoir, correct?
Correct.
And it is on marrying and having a relationship between neurodiverse persons.
Correct.
And I thought it would be really funny and humorous and so, but it has taken a little bit of a turn, but it's still coming out. So can you tell us a little bit about your forthcoming work? And, I'm excited.
Yes, I'm excited also. I think this is another difficult but very important story. And there actually are parts of it that are funny, but funny in the way where you laugh and then you win,
Yes.
because you realize that these two people are missing each other entirely. They're speaking different languages. When you have a different neurotype from your partner, that is by definition a high conflict situation because you are not speaking the same language. And words that a neurotypical person would use, an autistic person is going to interpret in a totally different way. And so, because my estranged spouse was masking, which is a term that's commonly used in the autistic community to mean trying to fit in and appear to be neurotypical, I didn't pick up or understand the extent of this developmental disability. I had a very sort of pop psychology view of what Asperger's syndrome or high functioning autism is. And I need to say that this terminology keeps evolving and changing.
Yes.
Asperger's has gone out of favor as a term. Now people prefer it to be just autistic or autism spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
But there are a whole host of other conditions that go along with the difference in the neurotypes. There can be executive function issues, rigid thinking, a condition called alexithymia, which from the Greek translates as no words for feelings, so that the autistic person does not understand their own feelings or anyone else's, and they find feelings frightening and confusing. There's a condition called pervasive demand avoidance, which is now being relanguaged in the autism community as persistent demand for autonomy. It's essentially like the adult version of oppositional defiant disorder. So my estranged spouse had all those conditions, and they revealed themselves slowly over time. So in this book, I'm showing how at the age of, I was actually in my late 60s when I fell in love with him. He was my dance partner. He was a fabulous dancer. And we had dated for a while and then broken up for a period of time and then got back together again. And when I got back together again with him, he had kind of improved some aspects of his life and was feeling pretty upbeat and optimistic. And I kind of went with that. And we ended up getting married when I was 71 and he was 67. And it seemed to me at the time kind of like a fairy story, like, wow, I never expected to be getting married this late in my life. And isn't this awesome? he's such a great dancer and we have so much fun and we have so much in common. Well, sadly, that sort of quickly started to disintegrate. And so this book is the story of the narrator's gradual discovery of all the places along the way where her illusions or her belief about how this relationship was going to play out are being undermined and falling apart. So as the reader, you're going through that journey with her and discovering it as she discovers it. So the book is called Disconnected, Portrait of a Neurodiverse Marriage.
Okay.
And has an awesome foreword written by a therapist who specializes in working with neurodiverse couples. As I discovered to my surprise, there are not that many therapists who really can work effectively with a neurodiverse couple. The issues between the neurotypes are so complex that it really requires very specialized skill and a lot of experience in translation. You have to be able to translate from the allistic or neurotypical side to the autistic side and back again. And there aren't that many people who are really trained in that and skillful at doing it. Thankfully, more and more are coming along because they're very needed. But traditional therapy is useless and can be even worse. It can be detrimental because the neurotypical person looks crazy. The autistic person is masking with the therapist, pretending they understand the language, acting very reasonable. They typically are quite logical. Whereas the neurotypical person who's gone through the neglect, the kind of gaslighting, the things that have been not disclosed and then later are disclosed in a shocking manner, appears to be hysterical. So it's very, very tricky. And one of the things I'm doing in the book is offering a list of resources specifically geared to neurodiverse couples. There's plenty out there about autism, about these relationships, especially with people later in life where typically the spouse is undiagnosed and the person who discovers that they're autistic is the spouse, which is tricky.
Right.
Sure. So, again, I feel as I did when I was asked about donation, I feel exactly the same about this. I went through this very painful experience. If I can help even one person who is puzzled by what is going on in her relationship and why her husband does not appear to be the same person that she married, and the change is very sudden as it was in our case, maybe I can help by shedding some light on this, sharing my experience, and pointing the person towards some resources. So that's the goal.
That's exciting. And it comes out in November.
Correct. Comes out from Vine Leaves Press on November 11th. Pre-orders will be available in August. Stay tuned.
Fantastic. And where can people connect with you and learn more about your books and your other writing?
Well, they can connect with me on my website, which is Eleanor Vincent, my name.com. And I'm happy to entertain questions, requests,
Yes,
kudos, whatever.
I love it. And you are such a beacon of information for organ donation as well and Swimming with Maya. So I just want to say that's huge. I'm so glad. I have a little sticker myself. And I just think if you can lean into a very difficult time, but still find a greater purpose to at least help some other people, just as you're doing now in your second book, bravo. That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your time today so generously and your wisdom in your writing.
Thank you.
Means the world. And for the endorsement way back when.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's show. Thank you so much for listening. Now, to find out more, head on over to lameredith.com and be sure to hop on the mailing list too. If you've enjoyed this show, please leave a rating and review or share with a friend. And if you really, really liked it, go ahead and subscribe so that you never miss another episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Persistence U with Lisbeth.